My name is Ifeoma, and this is the true story of the day my mother dressed me in my best clothes, put two dresses in a plastic bag, handed me a photograph, and gave me to a man I had never met. I was 9 years old. At the time, I did not understand why my mother was crying or why she kept saying, "Forgive me." Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes. Every child deserves love. I'll me tell you what happened that day.
My name is Ifeoma, and this is the true story of the day my mother dressed me in my best clothes, put two dresses in a plastic bag, handed me a photograph, and gave me to a man I had never met. I was 9 years old. She combed my hair with her fingers that night, slowly, like she was trying to memorize the shape of my head. I thought we were going to church. I thought maybe she had found God again. But when the black car pulled up in front of our broken gate, she didn't walk me to the door. She handed me the bag. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't hug me. She just looked at me with eyes I had never seen before, empty, like she had already left before her body did. The man in the car had clean shoes and a gold watch. He didn't smile. He just opened the door and waited. I looked back at my mother one last time. She had already turned around. I didn't know it then, but I would not see her again for 11 years. His name was Chief Emmanuel. That's what the driver called him, Chief. He didn't talk to me in the car. He looked at his phone the whole time. I sat with my plastic bag on my lap and stared out of the window as the streets I knew disappeared behind me. We drove for a long time, past markets, past churches, past things I had never seen before. When we arrived, the house was bigger than anything I had ever imagined. 3 floors, iron gates, flowers I didn't know the names of. A woman met us at the door. She looked at me the way you look at furniture being delivered. She turned to Chief and said, "Is this the one?" He nodded and went inside. The woman knelt down in front of me. Her perfume was too strong. "You will work hard," she said quietly. "You will not cry. You will not ask questions. Do you understand?" I nodded. Good. She stood up and walked inside. I stood alone at the door for a full minute before I understood. I was not a guest. I was not family. I was not even a child to them. I was help. In that house, I learned to disappear. I woke up before the sun. I swept. I scrubbed. I washed plates that were bigger than my face. I ironed shirts I was never allowed to touch otherwise. Chief's wife, her name was Madam Gloria, watched everything I did with sharp eyes and sharper words. If a cup was not dry enough, she would make me wash it again, 3 times, 4 times. I slept in the room behind the kitchen. The ceiling leaked when it rained. I learned to put a bucket there so the sound wouldn't keep me up at night. Chief and Madam had 2 children, a boy named Tobechuku, a girl named Sandra. They were close to my age. They watched cartoons every evening. They ate chocolate biscuits. They had school books with their names written inside. I watched them from the kitchen doorway sometimes, just for a moment. Sandra caught me once. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Then she turned back to the TV. I went back to the kitchen. But I kept thinking about my mother. Why did she send me here? What did that man give her in return for me? And the worst question of all, did she know what this would be like? I kept the photograph my mother gave me hidden inside the lining of my second dress. I took it out sometimes at night when the house was quiet and only the ceiling fan filled the air. In the photo, my mother is young, very young. She's smiling at something outside the frame. Her hair is done nicely. She's wearing a yellow blouse. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, Adiazi, 1994. That was her name, Adiazi. I had always called her Mama. I would stare at that young woman in the yellow blouse and try to connect her to the woman who had handed me to a stranger without a hug. Who were you before you became my mother? What happened to you that made you this way? One evening, Madam Gloria came into my room without knocking. She saw the photograph in my hand. She snatched it before I could react. She looked at it for a moment. Something moved across her face. Then she put it back on the table and walked out without a word. She left it. I don't know why, but that night I held it tighter than I ever had, because it was the only proof that somewhere, once, my mother had been happy. And I needed to believe that she had loved me before the world broke her. After 2 years in that house, something unexpected happened. Madame Gloria enrolled me in school. Not because she cared about my future. She enrolled me because a government health worker came to check on domestic workers in the area and asked about the children in the house. Madame panicked and rushed to get papers the next day. So, I went to school. In the morning, I cleaned. In the afternoon, I learned. In the evening, I cleaned again. I was behind, very behind. Some children laughed. I ignored them. But there was a teacher, Mrs. Okonkwo. She had round glasses and very small feet. She wore the same green scarf every Friday. One afternoon, she kept me after class. I was sure I was in trouble. Instead, she put a composition book on my desk. "I have been watching you," she said. "You are behind in numbers, but the way you write sentences," she paused, "you have a gift." No one had ever called anything about me a gift. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. She tapped the composition book. "Write everything, all of it. Write until your hand hurts." She walked back to her desk. Nobody can take words away from you. For the first time in 2 years, I cried. But not from pain, from something I had almost forgotten existed. I thought Sandra hated me. For 3 years, she looked through me like I was glass. She never said please. She never said thank you. She just pointed at things she wanted done. But one night, everything changed. It was past midnight. I was on my way to the kitchen for water when I heard soft crying from Sandra's room. I stopped outside her door. I should have kept walking. In that house, nothing was my business except what Madame told me to touch. But the crying sounded like something I recognized. That particular sound a person makes when they are alone and they think no one will ever understand. I knocked softly, twice. Silence. Then, very quietly, "Come in." She was sitting on the floor beside her bed, her knees pulled up. She had been crying for a while. Her eyes were swollen. "Don't tell my mother," she whispered. I sat down on the floor beside her, not too close, but close enough. We sat in silence for maybe 20 minutes. I didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't explain. When she finally stopped trembling, she looked at me sideways. "You're not so bad," she said quietly. That night, something shifted between us. I didn't know yet that Sandra would one day be the person who helped me find out what my mother had done and why. Mrs. Okonkwo gave me the composition book. I filled it in 4 months. Most of it was letters I wrote to my mother that I never sent. "Dear Mama, I am still here. I am still alive. Are you? Dear Mama, today I learned how to make pepper soup from scratch. The cook said I have good hands. I wanted to tell you, but there is nowhere to tell. Dear Mama, I dreamed about the room we shared in the old house, the blue curtain, the way the light came through in the morning. I woke up and I was still here, in this room with the leaking ceiling. But for a few seconds, I was home. Dear Mama, do you think about me? I try not to wonder, but at night, wondering is the only thing I know how to do. Dear Mama, I think I understand why poor people do hard things sometimes. I think I understand that choices are not always really choices when you are desperate. But understanding something doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt. Pause. Long pause. Dear Mama, I forgive you. I don't know if I mean it yet, but I am writing it down so that one day, maybe, my heart will catch up to the words. I hid the composition book back in the lining of my dress, beside the photograph. 2 treasures, both connected to the same woman who left me, both things that kept me alive. In my 5th year in that house, I began to notice things I was too young to notice before. Chief Emmanuel was not always home. Sometimes he was gone for weeks. When he returned, Madame Gloria's voice changed, tighter, clipped, like she was holding something very carefully between her teeth so it wouldn't break. I noticed the way the housekeepers whispered when he drove in. I noticed the way Madame checked his phone when he left it on the table. I noticed a woman who called the house once. I picked up the phone. She asked for Chief in a voice that was too comfortable, too familiar. When I told Madame, she didn't respond. She just walked to the window and stood there for a long time. One evening, I overheard Chief and Madame arguing in the study. The door was not fully closed. I was not trying to listen, but in a house where you are invisible, you hear everything. "You brought that woman's child into my house," Madame said. Her voice was shaking. "After everything." "Lower your voice," Chief said. "She looks at me every day and I..." The door clicked shut. That woman's child. Which woman? My mother? What did Chief have to do with my mother, beyond buying me from her? I went to my room. I took out the photograph. I stared at my mother's face for a long time. Something told me the answer to every question I had was in this house. I just had to be patient enough to find it. It was a Saturday afternoon. Sandra and I were washing vegetables in the kitchen, which never happened. Sandra didn't wash vegetables, but her mother had punished her for something and assigned her to the kitchen with me. We worked in silence for a while. Then Sandra said very quietly, "You know they knew each other before." I looked at her. "Your mother and my father." She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the tomatoes. "They were together before he married my mom, a long time ago." My hands stopped moving. "My mom found out when you came. She recognized your mother's name on the paper my dad brought. She didn't say anything, but I heard her crying for 3 days. I couldn't speak." "He paid her. Your mom, he paid her to send you here." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were honest, sad. "I think he wanted to know what you looked like." Pause. The vegetable dropped from my hand into the sink. Know what I looked like. I was not just cheap labor. I was not just a transaction between a desperate woman and a rich man. I was something else entirely. And the question that rearranged everything I thought I knew was now sitting in my chest like a stone. Was Chief Emmanuel my father? It was Madame Gloria who found the composition book. I had moved it from my dress to beneath my mattress. I thought it was safe. I thought no one would look. But Madame had come into my room while I was at school. She cleaned it, which she had never done before. I think now she was looking for something. When I came home, the composition book was on my small table, open. I stood in the doorway and felt the blood leave my face. Madame Gloria was sitting in the corner of my room, waiting. Her arms were folded. Her face was unreadable. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I started to think about running. But where would I run? I had no money, no family address, no phone. "You write beautifully," she said finally. Her voice was strange, not cruel, not kind, something in between. I said nothing. "You write about your mother. You write about forgiving her. Does she deserve it?" The question surprised me so much that I answered honestly, "I don't know yet." Madame Gloria looked at me for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to the door. She stopped. "Your mother and I," she said quietly, "have more in common than either of us would like." She left without explaining what she meant. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall for a very long time. 3 days after Madame Gloria read my composition book, an envelope appeared under my door. No name on it, no explanation. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address written in neat, careful handwriting. Below the address, 2 words. She moved. And below that, a phone number. My heart stopped. This was my mother's address, my mother's number. For 11 minutes, I sat on the floor and stared at it. Who put this here? Was it Madame? Was it Sandra? Was it someone else entirely? And why now, after 5 years? I thought about burning it. Part of me didn't want to find my mother. Part of me had learned to live without her the way you learn to live with a missing tooth. You stop touching the empty space because it only reminds you of the loss. But another part of me, the part that had failed an entire composition book with unsent letters, that part grabbed the paper and held it against my chest. I memorized the address. I memorized the number. Then I hid the paper back inside the photograph. I didn't know when I would use it. I didn't know if I would ever use it. But I knew now that somewhere in this city, my mother was alive. And she had moved, which meant she was still moving, still trying to live. And for some reason, that broke me open in a way that nothing had in 5 years. I was 15 when I finally made the call. Sandra let me use her phone when her parents were out. She didn't ask questions. She just handed it to me and went to her room and closed the door. I sat outside on the back steps. The sun was going down. The compound smelled like evening and fried plantain from the neighbors. I dialed the number. My hand was shaking. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a woman's voice. Hello? 5 years. Her voice sounded the same, but smaller somehow, like it had been pressed between things. I could not speak. My throat had closed completely. Hello? She said again. I heard her breathing. I heard something in the background. A television. Children laughing. Mama, I finally said. Silence. Long silence. Then the sound I had not expected. She was crying. Hard. The way someone cries when they have been holding something for so long, their body finally collapses under the weight. Ifeoma, she whispered. My name. The first time I had heard my own name in 5 years, said by someone who loved me. I'm still here, Mama, I said. And then I was crying too. We cried together on the phone for almost 10 minutes before either of us could speak. We cried, and then we talked. My mother's voice kept breaking. She asked if I was okay. She asked if I had eaten. She asked if they treated me well. The questions of a mother, even a guilty one. I didn't answer some of them. I just asked what I had to ask. Mama, why did you send me? I was sick, she said. Very sick. I had no money for treatment, no family left. Your father, she stopped, cleared her throat. I was desperate, Ifeoma. Yes, her voice was barely there. Do you know who he is to me? Do you know what I found out? Silence. Deep, revealing silence. You know, I said. More silence. Then a sound that was half sob, half breath. His family had money, she whispered. I thought you would be. I told myself you would be safe, cared for. I told myself. Her voice cracked completely. I made myself believe it wasn't what it was. Was he my father? Pause. 3 full seconds. She didn't answer with a word. She answered with the sound of someone who had been living in shame for 5 years, finally letting out the breath they had been holding. And that sound told me everything. I was not just a girl who had been sent away. I was a secret that had been sent away. 2 days after the phone call, Chief Emmanuel knocked on my door. Not summoned me, knocked. In 6 years, he had never knocked on my door. I stood up slowly. My heart was loud. I opened the door. He was alone, no driver, no phone in his hand. He was wearing a simple agbada, not his going out clothes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped back. He entered. He looked at the small room, the bucket under the ceiling stain, the mattress, the single curtain. Something moved across his face. I watched him take it in, and I was glad. I wanted him to see it. "You know," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "How long?" "Over a year." He made a sound, a man swallowing something very hard. "I want to explain," he began. "I know what happened," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. "I don't need you to explain right now. What I need is one answer." He looked up at me. "Did you know about me before you paid her?" He held my gaze for a long time. Then he looked down at his hands. "Yes," he said. I nodded, just once. "Then you should have done better, both of you," I said quietly. And I walked out of my own room and left him sitting there. The house cracked open after that. Madame Gloria came to me 3 days after Chief's visit. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. Me on one side, her on the other. No performance, no authority. Just a woman and a girl. She said, "I knew you were who you were from the beginning when he brought the papers with your mother's name on them." She folded her hands on the table. "I thought if I kept you in the background, invisible, maybe it wouldn't be real." I watched her. She said, "I treated you badly. I told myself it was because you were the help, but it was because you were proof." Her jaw tightened. "Every time I looked at your face, I saw his betrayal." I thought about all the extra washing, all the sharp words, all the cold mornings, all of that aimed at a child who didn't ask to be born. "I am sorry," she said. The words were clearly unfamiliar in her mouth, like clothes she wasn't used to wearing. I looked at her for a long time. This woman who made my childhood darker. This woman who was also, in her own way, a victim of the same man. "Okay," I said. Not, "I forgive you." Not, "It's fine." Just, "Okay." Because I was done carrying other people's guilt. From that day, I would only carry my own healing. After the truth came out, Chief changed. He walked into the kitchen one morning and told me I would no longer be working in the house. He had arranged for me to attend a proper secondary school as a full student, a real student, with a bed in the dormitory, textbooks, pocket money. He said it like a transaction. No emotion, no ceremony, just facts delivered across a kitchen. I wanted to refuse. A part of me wanted to look at him and say, "Too late." But I was 16. I was behind in school. I had nothing. So I packed my things into a new bag he had bought. Not a plastic bag, a real bag, green with a zipper. And I said goodbye to Sandra. Sandra held me for a long time. She whispered, "You are going to be the most brilliant person I know. I've always known." I held her back, and I thought, in this house of pain and secrets, somehow I had found a sister. Madame Gloria stood at the top of the stairs. She didn't come down, but she watched. Chief drove me himself. No driver, just the two of us in silence for 40 minutes. As the school gates came into view, he said, "I know this is not enough." I said, "No, it's not." He nodded. I got out of the car without looking back. For the second time in my life, I entered a new place alone. But this time, I was choosing it. I was the oldest girl in my form, 16 in a class of 13-year-olds. Some of them laughed at first, whispered. I had spent 6 years invisible in a house full of people who pretended I didn't exist. A classroom of children with no real power over my life? That I could manage. I studied like it was the only food I was allowed to eat. Mrs. Okonkwo had said I had a gift with words. I hadn't forgotten. Every essay, every composition, every exam question that needed writing, I poured myself into it. My science was weak. My maths was catching up. But my English, my literature, My ability to take a story apart and put it back together in ways people hadn't thought of, teachers started to notice. I was offered a position reading the morning devotion at assembly. Then I was asked to represent the school in a regional essay competition. I wrote about growing up in someone else's house and learning that belonging is not given, it is built, brick by brick, from the inside out. I won first place. The prize was a dictionary and a handshake from the headmistress. I cried in my dorm room that night, not from sadness, from the dizzy, overwhelming realization that something was finally going right. That I was not just a girl who had been sold. I was a girl who could write the truth of it and be applauded for it. In the long holiday of my final year of secondary school, I went to find my mother. I took a bus, 2 buses, then a shared taxi. I had the address memorized. I found the building, 3 floors, washing on the line outside. I climbed to the 2nd floor and stood in front of door number 7. I knocked. A child opened the door, a boy, maybe 6 years old. He stared up at me, and then my mother appeared behind him. Time does strange things to people. She was older. Her face had lines it didn't have in the photograph. Her hair was shorter. She looked like a woman who had fought many seasons and was still standing, but only just. We stood looking at each other for what felt like a full minute. Then she did something I had not expected. She reached out and touched my face with both hands, the way you check something to make sure it's real. And then she pulled me inside. No ceremony, no prepared speech. Just a woman and her daughter in a doorway finding their way back to each other across an ocean of pain. The boy looked up at both of us. "Mama, who is she?" he asked. My mother and I both looked at him. Then she said, very quietly, "Your sister." His name was Chukwuemeka, Emeka for short. He was 6 years old and had no interest in the complicated history between his mother and the tall girl who had appeared at their door. He just wanted to know if I could play. Within an hour of arriving, I was sitting on the floor of their flat, helping him build a tower out of plastic cups. My mother watched from the kitchen doorway. Her face was doing something I hadn't seen in a long time. Something open. Later, after Emeka had gone to bed, my mother and I sat at the small table with 2 cups of tea she had made carefully, like the making of it was important. "Who is his father?" I asked. "A man who left," she said simply. "He was good at first, then he wasn't." I nodded. The specific details didn't matter. The shape of the story was familiar enough. "I looked for you," she said. "When I got better, when I had money again, I went back to Chief's area. They told me he had moved. I didn't know how to find you." Sandra got me the number. Mama's eyes went to the table. "I was so ashamed," she finally said. "Every day for years, I was afraid if I found you, you would look at me the way I'm looking at you now?" I asked. She met my eyes. "No," I said. "I'm not angry, Mama. I'm just tired of being angry." We didn't hug that night, but we talked until 2 in the morning, and that was its own kind of holding. The second day, my mother told me the full story. She and Chief Emmanuel had been together for almost 3 years before he left her to marry into a wealthy family. A strategic marriage, his family called it. My mother found out she was pregnant after he left. He told him. He sent money once. After that, nothing. She raised me alone, no family support, 2 jobs, moving from room to room, saving coins in a tin under her mattress for my school fees. Then she got sick. A tumor, the kind that needed surgery and medicine she could not afford. Chief came back through a mutual friend. He offered to pay for her treatment, but there was a condition. "He wanted to meet you," my mother said. I was angry at first. Her voice dropped. Then the pain got bad enough that I stopped being angry and started being desperate. She looked at me across the table. "I thought if you lived in his house, you would be safe, you would be fed, You would go to school. I convinced myself it was a choice, but her voice broke. A mother who is really choosing would never have turned around and walked away without looking back. I sat with that. All these years I had asked if she knew what that house would be like. Now I understood. She had known, and she had done it anyway. Not from not loving me, but from loving herself just enough to stay alive. The hall was full. I stood at the microphone and looked out at the faces, strangers mostly, readers, writers, academics, young students like me. And there, in the third row, together in a way that must have taken everything in them, my mother, Sandra, Chief Emmanuel, and Mrs. Okonkwo. My mother had worn yellow. I almost lost myself when I saw that. I said, "This essay is called Belonging. It is also a true story." And then I read. I read about being 9 years old and the black car. I read about the plastic bag. I read about the back room and the leaking ceiling and Mrs. Okonkwo's round glasses and letters I never sent. I read about 2 girls sitting on a floor in the dark, about a phone call at sunset, about cream-colored paper and words that said, "You were loved badly and cowardly." I read about cooling cups of tea and plastic cup towers and a little boy who did not know or care about complicated history. I read about the photograph. When I finished, the room was very quiet. Then it was very loud. I looked at my mother in the third row. She was crying. She was also smiling, and she was wearing yellow. I am 32 years old. I live in a flat with good windows and no leaking ceilings. I have a bookshelf that takes up an entire wall. On the top shelf is a green bag, old and faded, and inside it, still folded in the lining, an old photograph of a young woman in yellow. My mother visits every school holiday with Emeka, who is now 20, studying engineering and still beats me at cup towers. Sandra calls every Sunday. She has 2 daughters. She has named one of them Ifeoma. Mrs. Okonkwo is retired. She still writes letters, by hand, on cream paper. Chief Emmanuel passed away 2 years ago. I went to the service. I sat at the back. I didn't speak, but I was there. That was the choice I could make. I still write. I am always writing. 3 books now, a 4th on the way. People ask me if I am happy. I think about that word carefully when they ask me. I am not the kind of happy that means nothing ever hurts. I am the kind of happy that means I know how to hold pain without being destroyed by it. I am the kind of happy that means the people around me are real and chosen and dear. I am the kind of happy that means when I sit at my window in the morning with tea, I feel grateful. Grateful for the composition book, for the round glasses, for the cup towers, for the yellow dress, for a little girl in a plastic bag who held on and built a life and did not let the hardest chapter become the only one. You are not the worst thing that happened to you. You are not the hardest chapter. You are the whole book, and the best parts are still being written.